Vader's respiratory system functions as a deliberate sound cue that shapes how viewers interpret his presence within a scene. Rather than serving solely as a medical artifact of his survival, the breathing operates as a designed auditory marker that communicates narrative information before any character speaks or moves. Film sound departments employ this motif consistently across appearances to ensure that the audience anticipates tension, conflict, or authority the moment the noise begins. Its early introduction in several scenes demonstrates how the breathing acts as a preemptive signal that situates Vader within the cinematic environment. The breathing operates as a form of diegetic scoring, providing rhythmic structure that substitutes for traditional musical build-up. In corridors, starship rooms, and confined spaces, ambient audio is reduced or removed to prioritize the mechanical inhale and exhale. This mixing choice ensures the breathing becomes the dominant auditory element, guiding pacing and attention. The audience's focus is drawn toward Vader's entrance through sound rather than camera framing, producing a consistent cue across the original trilogy and later adaptations. Sound designers utilize Vader's breathing to impose spatial dominance. Because the sound is mixed louder than most background effects, it occupies a disproportionate amount of auditory space relative to the physical space Vader occupies. This creates a perceptual imbalance where his presence feels larger than the environment. Scenes on the Death Star, Cloud City, and Endor all follow this pattern. The result is a sound-centric form of presence in which the auditory footprint exceeds the visual footprint. The mechanical pattern of the breathing also functions as a non-verbal communication tool. The rate, intensity, and volume vary subtly depending on the narrative context. During interactions with subordinates, the pattern is stable and even, signaling controlled authority. In combat situations, the breathing becomes louder and more forceful, indicating heightened physical exertion. These variations allow the breathing to provide interpretive cues about Vader's state without requiring dialogue or facial expressions. Vader's mask removes conventional emotional indicators such as micro-expressions, facial tension, or eye movement. The breathing compensates for this absence. It becomes the primary auditory channel through which viewers infer internal conditions. The consistency of the cue across films creates a recognizable system that audiences learn to read. Changes in pattern can therefore be interpreted as shifts in motivation or psychological state, even though the character's physical appearance remains fixed. The structure of the breathing sound also creates a sense of temporal rhythm. The repetitive pattern divides scenes into segments aligned with each respiration cycle. Editors frequently cut shots at or near inhalation and exhalation points, allowing the ta or mai breathing to influence visual pacing. This technique appears in sequences such as the hallway encounter in A New Hope and the Bespin confrontation in The Empire Strikes Back. The breathing effectively becomes a metronome for shot progression. Directorial choices amplify the breathing's primacy by suppressing other diegetic sounds. In several cases, footsteps, machinery, or atmospheric hums are reduced to foreground the respiratory system. This selective mixing isolates Vader aurally from his environment, reinforcing his thematic role as a figure who alters the audiovisual landscape merely by appearing. The sound not only occupies space, but suppresses alternative sources of auditory information. The breathing also establishes asymmetry between Vader and other characters. Most characters speak, gesture, or emit incidental noise that conveys vulnerability or emotional fluctuation. Vader, by contrast, communicates primarily through a constant mechanical rhythm. This asymmetry frames interactions as unequal. Characters adjust posture, tone, and behavior in response to the breathing before Vader issues any commands. Their reactions demonstrate the sound's functional impact within the diegesis. From a production standpoint, the breathing serves as an anchoring motif. Its timbre, frequency range, and rhythmic structure remain consistent across films, allowing it to function as an auditory identifier similar to a leitmotif. This consistency enables the sound to act as a brand-like marker, signaling continuity of character across decades of media. The breathing becomes synonymous with Vader in the same way that musical motifs are associated with other figures in the saga. The mechanical quality of the breathing contributes to its interpretive function. Because the sound lacks organic nuance, it implies technological dependence. This dependence informs audience understanding of Vaders' physical limitations. Scenes that emphasize the breathing's metallic texture remind viewers of the character's prosthetic reliance without requiring exposition. The sound communicates disability and constraint through acoustics rather than dialogue. The breathing's prominence in quiet environments manipulates spatial perception. When the sound is the only audible element, it fills negative space and produces a sense of auditory isolation. Audiences interpret this isolation as tension, even in scenes with minimal movement. The controlled placement of breathing during pauses creates anticipatory silence that heightens audience focus. Silence is shaped not by the absence of noise, but by contrast with the breathing's presence. The auditory signature also interacts with musical scoring. Composers frequently reduce orchestration when Vader enters or employ minimalistic motifs to ensure the breathing remains dominant. This coordination between sound design and composition demonstrates intentional layering. The music does not compete with the breathing, but is structured around it, treating it as a narrative instrument rather than incidental noise. Vader's breathing constrains actor performance as well. Because facial expression is removed, performers conveying fear or hesitation rely on timing relative to the respiratory sound. Characters pause mid-sentence, adjust posture, or alter breathing patterns of their own in response. These behavioral adjustments reinforce the breathing's function as a structural cue that dictates interpersonal dynamics. Analysis of lighting and framing reveals further integration with the breathing. Directors often pair the sound with low-key lighting, long shadows, and restricted framing angles. The breathing becomes the anchor around which visual tension is constructed. It is not merely additive to the scene, but foundational to the overall design of Vader-centered sequences. In animation and contemporary adaptations, the breathing remains identical to the original trilogy recordings, evidencing its canonical importance. Even in scenes where Vader's body is absent, the breathing alone is sufficient for audience recognition. This durability confirms that the sound serves as a narrative device rather than a character detail. Its presence signals thematic weight independent of physical action. Vader's breathing functions not only as a structural audio cue, but also as a consistent indicator of his physiological limitations. The mechanical rhythm signals reliance on external systems rather than natural respiration. This dependency frames his physical state as compromised, allowing the audience to infer the extent of his injuries without explicit exposition. The sound design thus communicates his impaired condition through auditory evidence, rather than medical dialogue or visual detail. The reliability of the breathing pattern also highlights the uniformity of his existence. The lack of variation in pitch or timbre demonstrates that his respiration is governed by machinery rather than biological function. This consistency signifies durability and constraint simultaneously. It portrays Vader as physically stable but mechanically restricted. The sound thereby constructs a dual image of strength and confinement. Variations in breathing intensity during combat sequences reflect the interaction between exertion and technological support. Louder inhalations during duels indicate the armor's increased effort to sustain oxygen intake under stress. These audible changes reinforce the suit's role as a limiting rather than enhancing component. Viewers interpret these fluctuations as signs of physical vulnerability despite Vader's dominant combat style. Scenes involving psychological conflict utilize breathing modulation to convey internal tension. During confrontations with Luke, the breathing displays irregular pacing that deviates from its typical mechanical regularity. This irregularity suggests heightened cognitive strain or emotional conflict without relying on facial expression. The audience infers psychological shifts directly through sonic deviation from the standard respiratory pattern. In sequences where Vader's mask is damaged, the breathing loses its uniform timbre and becomes erratic. This alteration exposes the organic component underlying the mechanical facade. The contrast between the stable, machine-regulated pattern and the unassisted human gasps communicates the fragility concealed beneath the armor. Sound design emphasizes this vulnerability by amplifying the unfiltered respiration. The transition from mechanical breathing to organic respiration in Vader's final scenes provides immediate narrative clarity. The weakened breathing communicates physical decline more efficiently than visual cues. Reduced volume, inconsistent rhythm, and audible strain signal the collapse of the life support system. The audience identifies the severity of his condition through auditory indicators before any dialogue confirms it. The breathing also serves as an interpretive anchor during scenes that involve moral or ideological contrast. When Vader observes actions that challenge his alignment, subtle shifts in respiratory tempo indicate cognitive reconsideration. The consistency of the pattern across films enables audiences to detect deviation as meaningful. These auditory cues operate as internal monologue substitutes. Sound mixing amplifies breathing volume relative to environmental noise during high-stakes dialogue. This amplification isolates Vader acoustically, drawing attention away from external elements. Characters often pause speaking when the breathing intensifies, demonstrating its functional influence on conversational rhythm. The breathing therefore structures dialogue exchanges by creating natural breaks and imposing pauses. In sequences where Vader interacts with subordinates, the breathing functions as an index of authority. Officers frequently modify posture or tone in response to the sound alone. Their reactions indicate that the breathing has become an institutional marker within the Empire. It signifies hierarchical dominance and the presence of disciplinary threat without requiring overt aggression. The breathing's integration with thematic content reinforces the idea that Vader's identity is inseparable from technological mediation. The constant mechanical sound communicates that his existence is permanently regulated by machinery. This interpretation aligns with narrative themes concerning loss, transformation, and reliance on artificial systems. Sound design thus supports thematic analysis through auditory consistency. From a cinematic perspective, the breathing operates as a unifying device across disparate narrative contexts. Whether in starships, open environments, or in closed chambers, the sound maintains identical properties. This invariance provides continuity across films and scenes, ensuring the audience can identify Vader's presence irrespective of setting. It acts as an auditory motif comparable to a recurring musical theme. The breathing also influences viewer perception of pacing in scenes involving movement. As Vader walks, editors frequently match cuts to the respiration cycle, producing a synchronized rhythm between motion and sound. This reinforces the sense that Vader's physical actions are mediated through mechanical constraint. The rhythmic alignment strengthens the association between respiration and locomotion. In moments where Vader is silent for extended periods, the breathing sustains narrative attention. Long pauses would typically decrease tension, but the continuous mechanical respiration prevents this. The sound maintains audience focus and ensures the scene does not lose momentum. It functions as a stabilizing element that fills potential narrative voids. The contrast between Vader's breathing and the natural respiration of other characters produces interpretive separation. Human characters exhibit variable breath patterns influenced by stress, fatigue, or emotion. Vader's mechanized breathing stands apart through uniformity. This contrast highlights his altered condition and reinforces his narrative role as a figure distinct from organic norms. The breathing's presence in off-screen contexts demonstrates its utility as a narrative signal. When heard before Vader appears on camera, the sound prepares viewers for tonal shifts toward formality, threat, or confrontation. Directors employ this device to transition from neutral scenes to scenes defined by tension. The off-screen cue becomes a functional bridge between emotional states of the narrative. Collectively, these features establish Vader's breathing as an essential auditory mechanism that communicates physical limitation, psychological fluctuation, hierarchical authority, and thematic identity. The sound's consistent application across scenes and media forms a complex signaling system that replaces traditional expressive tools. Through mechanical rhythm, volume modulation, and contextual dominance, Vader's breathing operates as a comprehensive narrative instrument that informs viewer interpretation and structures scene dynamics.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.